She collapsed at work. Doctors exposed a shocking secret. Is this child inspired by the CEO? In the midst of a room buzzing with anticipation, Sarah stood clutching her presentation remote, sweat pooling on her palms. The campaign she had devoted nights and weekends to was finally set for its grand reveal, a chance to prove her worth as both a marketing manager and a mother striving for a better life for her daughter, Emily. She took a deep breath, trying to steady the racing thoughts that spiraled through her mind. Would they see the passion behind her concept? Or would they only focus on the numbers they craved? Her internal dialogue wrestled with fear. She had sacrificed so much, and now all of it hinged on this moment. As she advanced her slides, the pulse of anxiety quickened. Had forgetting her medication this morning altered her perception? Or was it merely the pressure swirling around her? She glanced around the room. Her colleagues' faces were a mixture of curiosity and expectation, each second extending into an eternity. A part of her desperately wanted to impress and validate all her sacrifices, but another part was confused, questioning whether all the late nights and missed soccer games were worth it. A nagging internal voice whispered, "What if they don't care? What if you aren't enough?" Building tension plucked at her chest like a frayed string, threatening to unravel her composure. It was too soon for her to be falling apart, especially at work. Then it happened. A sudden wave of dizziness washed over her. Her vision blurred, and the room spiraled into shadows. She felt her knees buckle, and before she could utter a sound, she crumpled to the floor. The silence that followed was suffocating, punctuated only by the frantic rustling of her co-workers reacting to her collapse. Panic surged through her. She barely registered the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her as they called for an ambulance. Rushed to the hospital, each bump in the road felt like a thud against her racing heart. When the doctor finally addressed her, his grave expression left no room for optimism. "You have an autoimmune disorder, Sarah. It's rare." Those words echoed in her mind, displacing the career trajectory she had meticulously crafted. How would she manage work, fight this illness, and remain the role model Emily needed? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into weeks, filled with medical appointments and late-night strategy sessions with her doctors. Some days she felt like she was drowning, grappling with both the relentless symptoms of her condition and the shrieking demands of her job. This unforgiving corporate world she fought so hard to conquer felt like a relentless machine, churning out expectant deadlines and office politics that only grew more foreign by the moment. But in the midst of that chaos, Emily began to bloom. Her daughter's keen mind and spark ignited a new project for school, a science fair idea focused on autoimmune disorders, inspired by her mother's experience. Though excitement glimmered when Emily pitched her vision, a twinge of guilt sliced through Sarah's heart. Was she putting too much on Emily's shoulders? Achieving greatness would only come at the cost of their peace, and yet she could see her daughter's relentless determination in every tiny detail. As they both navigated this unfamiliar territory, doubts crept in like shadows. The whispers inside Sarah's head intensified with every passing moment. Was Emily's brilliance a reflection of her own sacrifices, or a blatant reminder of what she could not provide? In a world that demanded so much, could they ever truly reclaim their narrative or find solace amidst their challenges? With uncertainty hanging in the air like an unresolved note, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. Sarah stood in the sunlight filtering through the kitchen window, her fingers trembling slightly as she stirred the coffee. The morning had a stillness about it, broken only by the distant sounds of traffic. She inhaled the rich aroma, trying to channel the quiet to calm her racing thoughts. The last few weeks had become an avalanche of medical jargon, fatigue, and relentless workloads. Each day felt like a test of endurance. "Mom, can I show you my project?" Emily's voice cut through the haze, pulling Sarah's focus toward the table where Emily had laid out colorful papers and science supplies, her eyes radiating eagerness. "Sure, sweetie. Let me finish this up." Sarah pushed back her simmering doubts about her own capacity to juggle motherhood and her health. She hoped that immersing herself in Emily's excitement would provide a momentary reprieve from her own worries. As Emily explained her project on autoimmune disorders, the way she lit up while discussing the symptoms and the science behind them was both heartbreaking and inspiring. "I want to make a poster that explains what it feels like to have it, to help others understand," Emily concluded, her face reflecting the fierce determination that Sarah recognized all too well. "It's amazing, honey. You're so creative." Sarah forced a smile, wondering if she sounded convincing. Inwardly, however, the twinge of guilt resurfaced, gnawing at her. Was she encouraging Emily, or inadvertently pushing her into caretaker mode too soon? It felt like a balancing act on the edge of a precipice. The conversation pivoted as Emily turned toward her homework. Sarah faced the looming day ahead, meetings cluttered with numbers, presentations filled with the cold calculation of performance metrics, and the never-ending chorus of corporate expectations. As she prepared mentally for another clash with the relentless demands of her job, a thought emerged. She needed to redefine what being a success meant for her. In that instant, she resolved that she wouldn't let the progression of her illness define her capabilities. And that brought anger, a sharpened sense of determination. If she had to fight, she decided she needed to do so on her own terms. If the world saw her as weak, they were in for a surprise. The day at the office was a battlefield, each interaction feeling like a test to her newly forged resolve. Her boss, Mr. Gilbert, summoned her with an urgency that made her stomach tighten. She entered his glass-walled office, a shroud of worry hanging in the air. "Sarah, we need to talk about the campaign's progress. It's slipping behind schedule," he stated, cold rationality lacing each word. The weight of expectation loomed heavily over her, a pressure that felt both suffocating and igniting. "I understand, and I'm committed to rectifying it," she replied, surprising even herself with the confidence that flowed through her response. As she laid out her tightened schedule, suggesting different strategies to catch up, she watched his scrutiny shift from doubt to cautious curiosity. "What if we also added a segment that reflects personal stories around the product offerings?" Her voice surprised even her, spilling forth her hidden capability to intertwine heart with commerce. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected diagnosis could propel her into a realm of innovation no one dared approach. Mr. Gilbert leaned back, contemplating. "Interesting angle," he replied, a hint of respect replacing the earlier skepticism. Stepping out of his office, Sarah felt a sense of clarity washing over her. This was her moment to turn her condition into a catalyst for growth, both personally and professionally. However, she knew the road ahead was fraught with conflict. As her strength wavered and corporate politics swelled, could she keep the momentum going? Moments later, through her window view into the bustling city, she spotted Emily walking home from school, her shoulders squared, and a spark of triumph apparent in her stride. Sarah's heart tightened with a brewing storm of emotions. As mother and daughter forged ahead together, almost as teammates, she couldn't deny the reciprocal nature of their growth. The thought sparked a profound realization. Each milestone and challenge was threading them closer together, impacting all they stood for. Yet, a lingering question hung in the air, one that demanded answers. Was it possible to not only succeed in the corporate world, but also to be the nurturing mother Emily needed? And as that question ignited a new fire within her, she couldn't shake the sensation that bigger trials awaited. What would her next confrontation reveal? The following day, Sarah woke up with a heaviness in her chest that felt like a lead weight. She sat on the edge of her bed, assessing her own reflection in the mirror, a drawn face marked by fatigue and resolve. The battle of expectations left little room for softness. Each crease etched upon her skin seemed to tell a story of sacrifice and survival. She had promised herself last night that she wouldn't back down. Her renewed determination spurred a fiery ambition she hadn't felt in years. Yet, uncertainty lurked like an insatiable predator, poised to pounce at the first sign of weakness. Thoughts of Emily flickered like a guiding light amid the darkness. Could she embody the fierce spirit her daughter displayed? The office greeted her with the frenetic pace of a city morning, an orchestra of ringing phones and clicking keys. As she crossed the threshold, Sarah swallowed hard, anchored by her intent to harness her illness as an asset rather than a hindrance. Her first meeting was with the design team, each individual bouncing ideas around like a game of pinball, bright-eyed and eager. As the discussion veered into creative territory, Sarah felt a pang of envy for their raw enthusiasm. Could her own muted palette of uncertainty find a way to contribute? She arrived at a pivotal moment when the conversation shifted to Emily's project. "What if our campaign included real stories from our users?" Sarah proposed, her voice breaking through the noise. "Make it personal. It will resonate more deeply, and it might even educate people on the implications and emotions surrounding our offerings." Stunned silence enveloped the room before the creative director responded. "Interesting perspective, Sarah, but that's outside our typical approach." "Perhaps," she replied, heart racing, "but every product has a story. My daughter has been working on a project about autoimmune disorders. It's deeply personal. People connect with truth. Isn't that what we're trying to achieve?" The room pulsated with a new energy. Ideas flourished while skepticism faded, and as her colleagues leaped into fresh discussions about integrating personal narratives into their strategies, pride swelled within Sarah. For the first time, she felt she was not just blending into the monotonous backdrop of corporate life, but painting over it with bold, vivacious strokes. By the end of the meeting, Ms. Turner, the head of marketing, approached her. "That was a solid pitch, Sarah. Who knew you had a flair for this side of our business?" Her words should have felt like praise, but the somber undertone whispered potential pitfalls. "Thank you, but it's more than just a campaign to me. It's about changing perceptions. It's what I'm living every day," Sarah said, a rush of both vulnerability and strength surging through her. Did she really mean that? As the day rolled on, she grappled with the lingering effects of her speech. That pulse of adrenaline had ignited an internal shift, yet she was painfully aware of the limitations her health dictated. The pressure was palpable. What if she collapsed under the weight of these commitments? The realization struck her. She was venturing beyond her comfort zone, potentially leading to a personal fallout she could hardly fathom. Meanwhile, Emily represented a fragile yet powerful force. The concept of her daughter harnessing this narrative would deepen their bond, but what would happen if the darkness of her own life overshadowed their connection? That evening, Sarah sought solace in a quiet corner of her kitchen. The faint sounds of Emily giggling while working on her project reminded Sarah of the innocent tenacity in their shared purpose. Could she thread the same determination into her professional life? However, just as she settled into this new understanding, her phone buzzed, an unknown number flashing on the screen. On a whim, she answered. "Sarah, it's Dr. Mitchell. I think we need to discuss your test results." Her heart sank as cold trepidation gripped her stomach. This wasn't the conversation she was prepared for. A sense of foreboding loomed over her. What revelations awaited her? Would they rise like fireworks of revelation, or descend like gravity's irrevocable pull? Instinctively, she tucked the phone closer to her ear, nerves singing anxious melodies, ready to confront whatever might lie ahead. As she braced herself for the weight of the words about to be uttered, she couldn't shake the feeling that this moment carried the potential to reshape her story entirely. She understood that the confrontation at work had only been the beginning. A storm was brewing that would demand every ounce of her resilience, forcing her to reevaluate not just her role as an employee, but who she truly was as a mother. The line crackled with tension, and she knew it. The time had come to face the truth, lurking in the shadows of her condition. What would this new battle reveal about her, and the path she must navigate? The sharp intake of breath was her only reaction as she processed Dr. Mitchell's voice on the other end of the line. A sense of dread washed over her, and she felt the world around her blur slightly, adjusting to the gravity of the moment. "Sarah, are you there?" Dr. Mitchell inquired, concern threading through his tone. "Yes, I'm here." Her response was barely a whisper. "Your recent tests came back, and I believe it's important we discuss them in detail," he continued, carefully choosing his words as if balancing on a tightrope. "I don't want to alarm you, but there are significant findings we need to address." Significant. The word echoed like a distant drum. It resonated in her chest, amplifying her heart's uneasy rhythm. While she had consistently brushed off moments of trepidation regarding her health as just another hurdle to overcome, she now felt the sheer weight of reality pressing down on her. "Can you just tell me what's going on?" she managed, a quiver slipping into her voice. "Your autoimmune markers are higher than expected. I believe it's crucial we schedule a follow-up to discuss treatment options," he stated with a practiced calmness that betrayed none of the urgency she felt. "Treatment options?" The phrase felt surreal, foreign, as if she had entered a realm of convoluted medical jargon she never intended to traverse. "Yes, there are a few avenues we can explore, and with your active involvement in the project at work, it's essential we address this promptly." Her thoughts spiraled. At that moment, her commitments weighed heavily upon her. The audacity of her pitch from earlier, the promise to push beyond her limits at work. Was there any way to balance it all without breaking? Each endeavor now felt like a frail strand, threatening to snap. "Can we meet tomorrow?" she asked, urgency slipping into her tone as she realized how critical it was to confront this new reality with clarity. If she prioritized understanding her condition, perhaps she could figure out a way forward, a method to balance both her ambitions at work and her responsibilities as a mother. "Absolutely," Dr. Mitchell replied, and as they finalized the time, Sarah felt the slightest shift away from the brink of panic. It wasn't certainty, but it was movement away from inaction. As she hung up, she stared at the countertop, the quiet hum of her home contrasting sharply with the tempest brewing inside her. It was then that a resolve began to crystallize. If she was going to navigate this storm, she needed to harness the strength that Emily had inspired within her. Thoughts of her daughter sparked an ember of determination. Emily was navigating her own battle, bringing light to complex issues through her project. Perhaps they could face their tumult together, each providing support to the other. But would that be enough? Driven by a renewed sense of purpose, she began drafting ideas for a proposal, blending her personal narrative with Emily's project to create something powerful. This convergence might be the crux of authenticity she needed to present to her colleagues while managing her own battles. The following day at work would require every weapon in her arsenal: vulnerability, resilience, and the fierce love of a mother. She needed to show her team not just the project's creative potential, but the deeper connection it would foster with their audience. Yet as she prepared to articulate her thoughts, another wave of doubt crashed over her. Would her colleagues respect her insights? Would they see her not as frail, but as someone whose experiences transcended personal struggle? With that uncertainty drumming in her chest, Sarah's mind drifted to the looming meeting. What would it reveal about her strengths and limitations? Even more pressing, how would she manage the dual weight of her health and the pressure of professional aspirations? The time for resolution drew nearer, and her probability for success hung in the delicate balance between honesty and ambition. Just as she felt ready to embrace the potential of her idea, the phone rang again. It was her daughter, wanting to discuss what she had worked on that day. Sarah hesitated briefly before answering. Another layer of complexity enveloped her. How to share her fragmented world without shattering the bright spirit of the girl who inspired her? Would she muster the courage to open up about her fears, transforming their dialogue into a source of mutual strength? As she prepared to speak, the uncertainty danced around her like restless shadows, whispering that the heart of her true evolution lay in this moment. The morning light streamed through the window, casting a warm glow that juxtaposed Sarah's tumultuous thoughts. She sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open, the blinking cursor waiting for the words she was simultaneously desperate to articulate and afraid to share. The meeting with her colleagues loomed like an approaching storm that threatened to gather above her with every tick of the clock. Coffee brewed lightly in the background, its familiar aroma momentarily grounding her in the present. Yet each sip felt like a reminder of her fragility, the heat contrasting sharply with the chill of uncertainty coiling in her gut. Today was not just another day at work, it was a reckoning. As she waited, Sarah traced the outline of her proposal pages, visualizing how her experiences as a mother and her health struggles could align with the project's goals. There had to be a way to channel her fear into the narrative, a way to show that raw honesty could spark meaningful connections with their audience. But would her colleagues understand and respect her perspective? Or would they dismiss her, tangled in their own ambitions? The minutes crawled by until the clock struck 9. She took a deep breath, her heart racing as she prepared to cross a threshold that she had put off for too long. Entering the meeting room, she felt a familiar energy in the air, a blend of anticipation and unease among her team members. "Let's kick this off," Matt, her supervisor, declared, flipping through his notes. Sarah took her seat, a sense of resolve washing over her as she reminded herself that vulnerability could be a strength, not a weakness. As they delved into project updates, she remained a spectator, her mind racing with tidbits of information and ideas, but fear locked her voice in place. She wasn't just battling uncertainty about her health. This was a confrontation against the doubts that whispered she wasn't strong enough to lead, that she wouldn't be taken seriously. When the presentation opened for feedback, Sarah felt the invisible weight of her truth pressing against her chest. This was her moment to intertwine her personal narrative with the professional. "Can I add something?" She surprised herself with the urgency in her voice. All eyes turned to her, and she felt the gravity of their attention. "I believe we can make this project not only about numbers and metrics, but about real stories that resonate. I've been navigating my own personal challenges, and I've realized how stories bridge gaps. They create connection." Her hands trembled slightly as she gestured. "I think we can incorporate empathy into our marketing approach. By sharing authentic stories, we could connect on a deeper level with our audience." Some nodding heads encouraged her, but Sarah could still feel the skepticism nipping at her heels. Were they buying into her vision, or merely humoring her? The room remained silent, and she pressed on, the words tumbling out faster than she could filter them. "Authenticity in our approach could redefine how we engage with our clients. I don't want this to be just another project. I want it to reflect who we are, challenges and all." As she spoke, her voice carried conviction, bolstered by the weight of her own struggles and her desire to inspire Emily. The silence in the room enveloped her, leaving her exposed, yet a flicker of courage began to burn inside her. After her pitch, Matt spoke up, breaking the tension. "That's an interesting take, Sarah. We should explore how to weave authentic narratives into our strategy." He opened the floor for discussion, and suddenly, a flood of ideas flowed from others. The collective creativity sparked an exhilarating energy, and she realized she was standing on solid ground. As the meeting wrapped, a smile crept onto her face. It wasn't just about the pitch, but about claiming her place. She was navigating her battles, but today, she had fought back against the doubts. She wasn't just a mother facing health challenges. She was a professional capable of innovation. When she returned home later that evening, a flutter of anticipation filled her as she sought to connect with Emily. If everything went well, she could show her daughter that strength could rise from vulnerability. But the question that lingered was not only about her health. What other unseen battles was she willing to face next? And how would she fortify herself against the storm of challenges ahead? The following morning found Sarah standing in front of her bathroom mirror, tracing her fingers over the signs of fatigue etched into her face. The exhilarating buzz from the meeting still clung to her, but it was underscored by an unsettling undercurrent. What had she truly accomplished? The accolades, the eager responses, were they genuine or merely polite gestures? As she applied her makeup with steady hands, Sarah scrutinized her reflection. There was resolve in her eyes, yet beneath it, a hesitance lingered. She had spoken her truth, but uncertainty still circled in her mind like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Today would demand more than her innovative ideas. It demanded unwavering confidence. The drive to work felt heavier than usual. With each stoplight, her thoughts ricocheted between the project's potential and the fear of exposing her vulnerabilities. She resolved to push through. She had breached a barrier, and there was no turning back nor yielding to the shadows waiting to creep in. Yet a voice inside warned her that the real challenge had only just begun. When she arrived, the office buzzed with an unusual energy, an echo of the spirit invigorated by her proposal. Sarah's colleagues nodded at her as she made her way to her desk, their chatter lively but static. She recalled their reactions. Certainly some had engaged, but others seemed to sidestep her ideas. "Hey, Sarah!" It was Raj, her teammate who had begun to frequently collaborate with her. He grinned, an invitation for further discussion. "I thought your pitch yesterday was brilliant. We have a brainstorming session later. Let's bounce some ideas around." For the first time that day, Sarah felt a flicker of excitement. Perhaps this was a chance to solidify her vision. "Yes, I'd love that," she replied, her smile igniting a spark of confidence. Engaging with him felt different. He seemed genuinely interested, pulling her away from the precipice of doubt. As the day wore onward, Sarah prepared for the session, her mind racing with potential ideas that danced just out of reach. She wasn't merely participating. She was orchestrating a transformation. Drawing strength from her own journey, she jotted down personal anecdotes that might align with the marketing narrative. The lines between her life and her work began to blur in a way that felt oddly liberating. The meeting room buzzed as Raj set the tone, pitching the first few ideas. Sarah listened intently, but the moment he invited feedback, she seized the opportunity. What if we highlighted stories of resilience alongside our messaging? Personal stories can merge market interests and emotional impact. Our clients will engage deeply. As she spoke, she felt the reassurance of her fellow team members. One after another, they began to echo her sentiments, building off her enthusiasm. The room ignited with energy, each contribution fueling her drive. For the first time, she realized she could cultivate light instead of merely fearing the shadows. However, just as the meeting reached its crescendo of creativity, a sudden silence enveloped the room. The unmistakable sound of a loud crash echoed outside. The air shifted, and everyone's eyes darted towards the large windows overlooking the street. Confusion turned into concern as they rushed to the window to see what had happened. "Is that—" Raj's voice trailed off, the realization dawning on him. A knot formed in Sarah's stomach, a mix of an instinctual dread and the instinctual urge to help. The sharp clamor of sirens began to pierce the atmosphere, a reminder of how precarious life could be. Turning back to her colleagues, she felt the tremors of uncertainty twist within her again. Their faces, once glowing with possibility, now wore expressions of worry. Could she maintain the incandescence she had ignited moments before? With a breath, Sarah resolved to confront this situation head-on. She didn't want to waver in this moment of crisis. How would she transform this disruption into an opportunity to lead? Not just within her project, but within her team. As everyone gathered at the door, panic flickering through her colleagues, a thought sparked in the back of her mind. What if this moment were a test, a true measure of her capability? She set her jaw, steeling herself against the fear creeping in, ready to embrace whatever came next. Before she stepped outside, a voice in her mind echoed through the uncertainty. The time had come to face her fears, both personal and professional. How would she rise to meet this new challenge? As Sarah opened the door, a cacophony of chaos greeted her. She took a tentative step into the sunlight, her instincts sharpened by the adrenaline surging through her. The shattered glass of a storefront window glistened on the street like dangerous confetti, and the crowd gathered outside seemed transfixed by the spectacle. Someone called for help, right? Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. Raj stood beside her, urgency knitting his brow. I think so, but we need to see what's happening first. Stay close. Her heart thudded in her chest as they maneuvered through the throng of onlookers. The gravity of the situation struck her as she spotted a young boy, disoriented and cradling his arm. He couldn't be more than 10, tears mingling with the dirt on his cheeks. Instantly, Sarah's mind raced. Her instincts as a marketer had always relied on reading emotions and uncovering narratives. But that moment demanded more than the nuances of persuasion. It was about immediate human connection and empathy. Hey there, kiddo. She crouched to his level, her voice soft and reassuring. What's your name? Ben, he stammered, his voice thick with fear. I think I broke my arm. Okay, Ben. I'm Sarah. Can you wiggle your fingers for me? As he complied, Sarah studied the scene. Around her, others began responding. Some had called for an ambulance, while others were trying to comfort the boy. Her leadership instincts flared again. With everyone buzzing like bees, a directive was needed. Someone had to coordinate action. Raj, she called out, can you help us clear some space? We need to keep Ben calm until help arrives. With newfound authority, she turned her focus back to him, expressing calmness even though uncertainty gnawed at her insides. You're doing great, Ben. Help is on the way. Just breathe. The boy looked up at her, the fearful sparkle in his eyes beginning to dull, and she realized she was gaining his trust. Something clicked within her. She wasn't just Sarah, the pitch presenter. She was Sarah, the human, capable of soothing fear with presence and compassion. As more people began to listen and follow her instructions, she leaned into this unexpected leadership role. It ignited within her a spark she hadn't fully acknowledged before. Could it be that each moment of panic, each present fear she had felt in her career was subtly preparing her for this? Sarah caught the worried glances of her colleagues, a mere glance, but one that spoke volumes. They needed reassurance, not just the boy. Taking a deep breath, she raised her voice over the growing tumult. Everyone, we need to channel our energy to support Ben and the emergency responders. Clear pathways and lend your hands. Let's bring this together. An audible shift occurred. The crowd responded to her rallying call. As she stepped into this newfound role, she felt a familiar rush, except it was more profound. This wasn't merely about ideas or products. This was about real human connections, making choices that mattered in moments that counted. Minutes felt like hours as they awaited the paramedics. But with every passing moment, Sarah could feel the tight knots of doubt unraveling within her. The boy looked at her as if she were a lifeline, a realization sparking within her, a truth far more valuable than any presentation or marketing strategy. But just as she began to embrace this new identity, the air shifted again. A dark figure emerged from the crowd, looming larger than life, his mouth set in a grim line. Sarah recognized him immediately. Caleb, the new executive, known for his quick judgments and unwavering focus on results. Why aren't we doing anything constructive? His voice cut through the murmur like a knife, a challenge echoing her inner fears. The intensity of his gaze pinned her down, a tempest of authority poised to crush the vestige of courage she was nurturing. In that moment, Sarah had a choice, to shrink back, as she had done in the past, or to stand firm against this new wave of scrutiny. As she opened her mouth to respond, her heart raced. A revelation pushed its way to the forefront of her mind. This was no longer just about the moment at hand, but also about the path she would choose moving forward. Would she succumb to his skepticism, or would she fight to define her own narrative here? The moment hung suspended in time, thick with possibility. How would she navigate this confrontation? Sarah's breath caught in her throat as Caleb's challenge hung over her like a storm cloud. Her thoughts raced. Should she let his words undermine the resolve she had just discovered? Should she retreat into the familiar shadows of self-doubt that had shaped so much of her professional life? "Caleb," she began slowly, channeling every ounce of the newfound courage she had uncovered. "What we're doing here is constructive. We're making sure Ben is safe and calm until the paramedics arrive." She held her ground, her voice gaining strength. "I understand your urgency, but right now, this is the priority." Caleb's intense gaze bore into her, searching for cracks in her resolve. For a split second, she felt small under his scrutiny, an echo of her days in the boardroom, where his authoritative presence had always loomed like a specter. Yet, she stood there, grounded by the weight of the situation. Raising her voice slightly to reach the back of the crowd, she added, "Every moment counts, and we need a clear head to make sure our actions matter." There was a subtle shift in the crowd, a ripple of acknowledgement as they heard her words. They believed in her vision and were gathering their energy around it. But Caleb remained unmoved, his lips pressed into a thin line. "This chaos isn't sustainable. Let's redirect. Business isn't about waiting for a savior. It's about results. Sometimes outcomes aren't immediately visible," she countered. "Real influence isn't about metrics. It's about impact." With every word she spoke, Sarah felt a flicker of empowerment kindling within her. This was different from the sterile world of numbers and data charts. This was visceral. Here, in the fray of humanity, she had found a sense of purpose that transcended her usual marketing playbook. The boy's grip on her hand tightened. He needed her certainty. She needed to remind herself that being effective in a crisis required navigating messy emotions both within and beyond herself. "That's true," Caleb replied, begrudgingly softening, but skepticism lingered in his eyes. "But don't forget the power lies in structure and purpose." "Purpose starts with connection," Sarah insisted, "with being present in moments that define what we do, what we are." At her words, the crowd shifted again, resignation replaced by shared commitment. Was it possible they saw in her the reflections of their own insecurities, their own struggles to find meaning in their work? The realization struck her as if she were sitting at the zenith of a revelation. This was more than just survival. This was about creating connection through common humanity. The sirens in the distance grew louder, but time felt elastic as she grappled with her connection to these moments. She could set the tone, be the bridge between chaos and empowerment, a force for good amidst the tumult. Her brow furrowed as she thought about Caleb's judgment. He wasn't just a barrier, he was a mirror reflecting her fears. She realized she had strayed from a crucial truth. Action could mean simply being there for someone, and that required courage. Choosing to stand amidst uncertainty could very well be her greatest strength. But amidst her thoughts, a feeling of trepidation crept back. What would happen once the paramedics arrived and the spotlight moved away from her? Would she dissolve back into the background? As she wrestled with her thoughts, she spotted Caleb stiffening again, ready to argue. But instead of countering back, she found herself poised for the unexpected. "Caleb," she said, her voice leveling with conviction. "This doesn't have to be a conflict, but a starting point. What if we redefine our approach to reflect not just numbers, but the core of who we are, together?" The timbre of her words echoed in her heart, each syllable igniting her passion. Before Caleb could respond, the sharp sound of sirens cut through the air, pulling her focus back to Ben, who looked at her with eyes full of hope mixed with lingering pain. As the paramedics arrived, adrenaline coursing through her veins, Sarah felt buoyed by her own determination, but the uncertainty of her next steps loomed large. Had she just crossed a threshold into a new kind of power, or was she merely standing at the edge of a precipice? Now, the real question was not only how she would change the narrative at work, but how she would hold on to this newfound conviction when faced with the tides of skepticism and doubt. Would Caleb's critique fortify her resolve, or challenge her desperately fragile courage? The air buzzed with urgency as Ben was gently placed on a stretcher. As she glanced back at Caleb, she realized the true confrontation was only just beginning. Would she reshape her destiny, or would she let it be defined by others? In the depths of her contemplation, an unsettling thought echoed in her mind. As the sirens faded, so might the clarity she had fought so hard to achieve. What awaited her back at work? The chaos began to settle as the paramedics whisked Ben away, but Sarah remained anchored in place, grappling with an urgency that had morphed into a lingering fear. She stood at the nascent crossroads of her emerging leadership, the gravitational pull of her old self looming ever closer, threatening the breakthrough she had just fought so hard to cultivate. The sweaty palms of doubt clawed at her resolve, pushing thoughts of inadequacy to the forefront of her mind. Focus, she whispered to herself, a small yet bitter mantra to reclaim her ground. But the path forward seemed laden with shadows. Caleb's stance remained firm, arms folded, examining her with a mix of authority and lingering skepticism. You understand this can't just be a moment, right? You need to bring this energy back to the office. This is where your real challenge lies. His voice struck her like a blunt instrument, dismantling her nascent confidence as he pointed out the brutal truth. With every beat of her heart, Sarah wondered if he was right. Was this experience just an ephemeral flicker of defiance against the entrenched patterns of her professional life? Would the corporate corridors swallow her attempts to redefine her role? What if I fail? Pervaded her thoughts, gnawing away at her newly found strength. Yet within that rod of doubt, a flicker ignited. There existed a choice. She could embrace this moment as a vessel for inevitable change, not just for herself, but for those who looked to her for guidance. The people around her had rallied to a collective cause without even realizing they were doing it. If she could nurture that instinct, she could become the architect of an environment where empathy married purpose. Caleb, Sarah started, her voice steadier now, electrified by an aspiration born from a deep well of conviction. I will take what just happened here and transform it into a framework for our work environment. I won't just go back to being an analyst. I will be a leader who elevates others alongside me. His brow furrowed slightly, the corner of his mouth twitching as if wrestling with weighing her words. Transform it how? These walls don't empathize. His voice was sharp, yet laced with curiosity, pushing her to solidify her evolving identity. Her mind worked rapidly, connecting dots she had often kept apart. What if I start hosting small group sessions? The idea tumbled out, each word solidifying her commitment. We can foster an environment where every voice matters, where feedback is the currency of connection, not just an assessment of skills. It can become an incubator for creativity. Caleb's gaze softened, a hint of something unyielding shifting. That's ambitious, but what are you going to do when the metrics don't show improvement? Her heart raced. They were now at the cusp of real confrontation. Metrics don't quantify growth or resilience, Caleb. They can't capture moments of genuine connection. She felt her chest swell with a mix of defiance and vulnerability. They can't account for how people will feel working in a culture that recognizes them for who they are, not just what they produce. Caleb's silence was pregnant with thought, and Sarah felt a wave of vulnerability flood her senses. She had laid bare her intentions, not just to him, but to herself. She could stand up to the quieter demons of her past that had shackled her ambition, but as she stepped from the crowded scene into the quiet of her own thoughts, it dawned on her. This was just the beginning. Each step taken to redefine their workplace would require the courage to face the inevitable backlash. Would her team embrace these changes or resist them? It became clear that the real work lay not solely in promoting connection, but in managing the dissent that could lurk beneath. Sarah felt a tightening in her chest as the question crystallized. Could she hold fast to her ambition amidst the storm of skepticism about her resolve? As the faint echo of sirens faded, she wondered how she would foster not just her own growth but that of her team when the inevitable conflict arose. The air buzzed thick with potential as uncertainty loomed over her ambitions. What awaited her upon her return to the sterile office? A place once void of the clarity she had now embraced. The struggles were hinted at, but further on the horizon lay the real challenge of evolution. Would she be met with support, or face rejection from those still clinging to cold pragmatism? The idea tumbled restlessly in her mind. To truly inspire and lead, she would have to confront the ghosts of her own complacency, be prepared for any backlash, and excavate the values she held most dear. But now, it was not just about her. It was about evolving a culture. The threshold ahead blurred as she clutched tightly to her determination. What uncharted truths would she unearth next? And would they pave the way for a more humane approach to business? Or would they expose raw vulnerabilities that could unravel everything? In the weeks that followed the chaos outside the office, Sarah began to reshape her narrative. The adrenaline had shifted into action, propelling her to approach her role with a renewed purpose that demanded attention. The full-blown initiative she outlined to Caleb became the cornerstone of her professional identity, an alliance of empathy and innovation. With each brainstorming session, she ignited conversations that merged lived experiences with marketing strategies. The narrative of her autoimmune journey inspired her colleagues to bring their own stories forward. No longer did Sarah stand on the sidelines, wrestling with doubt. She embraced her vulnerability, realizing it carved a path for deeper connections. As meetings turned into workshops that fostered collaboration and empathetic dialogue, Sarah felt the corporate walls that once bound her gradually dissolve, revealing a space where authenticity thrived, the kind of culture where performance metrics were measured alongside personal growth. Her colleagues acknowledged her transformation, offering their full support and engagement, and soon it became clear that the collective energy she had once feared to harness was driving the department toward unprecedented success. The campaign pitch, infused with real-life stories, garnered accolades, not just from clients but also from upper management. Mr. Gilbert and Ms. Turner praised Sarah as a landmark innovator, and she reveled in their applause not as an outpouring of validation, but as reinforcement of her purpose. Yet every success was accompanied by introspection, confronting the fears that initially threatened to drown out her resolve. Amid the acknowledgement and triumphs, Sarah took time to reflect on her journey. Late evenings spent with Emily had transitioned from narratives steeped in guilt to explorations of shared ambition. In the warmth of their kitchen, the earlier tension seemed a distant memory as they collaborated on Emily's project that now echoed Sarah's initiative at work. The quality of their conversations evolved into a shared wisdom, a pact of understanding that fortified both their spirits. However, the real test arrived unexpectedly. A flare-up of her autoimmune symptoms left Sarah fatigued, scrambling to balance her commitments. The darkness enveloped her again, a reminder that vulnerability had its limits. Yet in that moment of despair, instead of shying away, she took a different approach. She opened up to her colleagues, explaining her situation without defensiveness, depicting the reality of her journey and its intricacies. "Being open doesn't mean I'm weak," she explained during a team huddle. "But it does mean I'm human. If I expect you to bring your truth, I have to do the same." To her surprise, her honesty resonated deeply, igniting discussions about mental health and wellness in the workplace, and her colleagues rallied, offering to share workloads and brainstorm new ideas collectively. The power of her leadership transformed what could have been a moment of isolation into a rallying cry for a healthier workplace culture. Meanwhile, Emily's science project flourished, reflecting the essence of what Sarah had nurtured, a blend of personal narrative and the pursuit of knowledge. The day of the science fair arrived, and as Sarah watched her daughter present, emotions surged within her. Emily articulated not just the facts of autoimmune disorders, but infused her presentation with love, courage, and empathy. Sarah saw her resilience mirrored in Emily's determination, a testament to their joint evolution. As they walked home that evening, hand in hand, Sarah felt solidified in her dual role of leader and mother. She had conquered far more than she had ever imagined. Embracing her health challenges had empowered her, showing audiences at work that strength resided in honesty, connection, and narrative. The knowledge that she could juggle motherhood with soaring professional aspirations filled her with a sense of completeness no accolades could bestow. Her personal achievements had transformed into a canvas of shared empathy, painting a future where she could incorporate both facets of her life. Sarah stood taller now, embodying both competence and authenticity, fully recognized within her company and cherished by her daughter. In embracing her complexities, she had achieved what many simply dreamed of, a life fused with professional fulfillment and personal joy. With each new day, Sarah fortified her place among her peers, fully prepared to chase the next endeavor, unrelenting in the face of any uncertainties. She had not merely adapted, she had conquered, crafting a legacy of resilience that echoed through the hearts of her team and into the essence of her home. As she reflected on her journey, Sarah laughed softly to herself. The fears that once gripped her were now merely whispers, competing against the symphony of her achievements. This was her story, her legacy, and it had only just begun. Now, it's time for you to be part of this transformative journey. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire your own path. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support our community of personal growth enthusiasts, making a difference together. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's incredible story and the experiences you've drawn parallels from. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait, even one more second. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Join us